Episode 73 of the Interpretation Station is called to order. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new episode of the Interpretation Station. And what a historic episode we've got lined up for you. Oh yes, this is the first of its kind. It's our first venture, the Interpretation Station's first venture into Chinese, Mandarin. Now, some of you may be asking, how the hell are we going to do an episode of the Interpretation Station in Chinese when your humble host here really doesn't know a single word of Chinese? He knows "xie xie shu xi." I know that means "thank you, Chairman" or "thank you, President." That's about the limit of it. And I know "ni hao." I know saying "ni hao." Well, this is a new format of an episode because while I don't know any Chinese, I am joined today by a very special guest that I want to introduce you to. Her name is Ivy. Ivy, introduce yourself, please. You can switch your camera on. This is Ivy, okay? Ivy is a student at the University of Westminster, where she is studying a degree in interpretation and translation, a one-year course. And she is going, she is looking, obviously, she's naturally a Chinese A, and she is looking to sort of fine-tune her English B for her future career. And so between the two of us, between my experience in interpreting, now over a decade, 11 years, and with Ivy's, obviously, her A in Chinese and her burgeoning English B. Between the two of us, we are going to make an episode because she wants to improve, as I say, her English B, and I can help her do that. Now, the basis of this episode is actually, if you recall, if you've been following on the Interpretation Station group, a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I posted in the group a statement. I put up a screenshot of a statement in Chinese, and I said, is any Chinese speakers is anyone there brave enough to submit to me a sight translation of this text? Well, initially, no one took the bait. A week went past, 2 weeks went past. I'd pretty much forgot about it. And then lo and behold, I suddenly get a message one day from Ivy. Ivy'd sent in a recording of her attempt at that text. It was a text from the Human Rights Council. It was to do with the human rights situation in the Central African Republic. And so she sent it in, and I thought, well, that's very brave of Ivy. She's still quite early in her career. I thought, well, that takes real cojones, as they say. And I thought, let's try and make a new format of an episode where, okay, I don't know the Chinese, but I can certainly help, as I say, fine-tune Ivy's English a bit, give her a bit of polish to her English B. And so here we are. And at the same time, so hopefully this will help Ivy directly, but at the same time, I hope that any Chinese members of the Interpretation Station, any followers, any viewers of you out there, if you watch this episode, if you're trying to add an English B, which I think if you're working into from Chinese, I think that's pretty much par for the course. Everyone has to go both ways, right, Ivy? Yeah, okay. Everyone needs to have the English B to be a sort of Chinese interpreter. Hopefully you'll be able to also pick up a few little useful nuggets of knowledge along the way. Okay, so yeah, Ivy, how are you feeling? How are you doing today?
I'm good, but a little bit nervous at this moment.
A bit nervous. I'm a bit nervous as well. Don't worry. Whenever there's a new format, and my episodes have a new format, I'm always a bit like, ooh. I've only done a couple of collabs. I've done a couple of collabs with my Italian partner in crime, Sarah. So this is the first one pretty much apart from that. So okay, so this is what we're going to do, okay, everyone? So I'm going to play you through first. You should be able to see up on the screen the original that Ivy has prepared all this for me. See, she takes this seriously. We have the original text on the left in the Chinese. She has very usefully put in a transcript of her own rendering on the right. I'm just going to play the recording through for you first, just to, you can just follow along with it. It's only a couple of minutes long, 2 or 3 minutes long. And then me and Ivy are going to break it down, see what new things we can learn. So, okay, I'm going to play the text for you now.
Dear Chairwoman, China is a consistent supporter for the cause of peace in the Central African Republic, and we have provided all the help and assistance in our hands. Peace, stability are the preconditions for development. We sincerely hope that all the parties in Central African Republic could start from their long-term interest of the nations and their people, and to settle down disagreements throughout negotiations and dialogues, to mitigate the intense situations as soon as possible, as well as creating beneficial conditions to realize the safety and sustainable development for their country. The global community should also provide constructive help to the Central African Republic. China would work with the global community to further help the Central African Republic to achieve their goals of peace, safety, and development. Thank you, Chairwoman.
All right, so there you go. That was Ivy's effort at that. So now we're going to sort of go through it. So just to remind you all, so this was, let's say, the Central African Republic. And you are quite entitled to say, but you can call them the CAR. It's a bit of an awkward name, the Central African Republic in general. People at the UN, we tend to just say the CAR. Maybe you want to say maybe the first time you hear the name Central African Republic, maybe you give it the full name, but then after that, just do yourself a favor, and just call it the CAR. It really trips off the tongue a lot more easily. Okay, so let's just go from the start. So Ivy here. This is from the Human Rights Council, and really, unless you work there, you're not going to know. But so the top person in the Human Rights Council, it's the president. Okay, It's annoying because at the UN, different committees, different commissions, whatever. Some of them have presidents, some of them have chairs. Okay, chairman, chairwomen. I tend to try and avoid getting trapped in having to give them a gender, okay? So if it's a president, I just say president. I don't bother with Mr. or Mrs. President. You know what, often it's difficult. Sometimes, especially doing all these remote meetings, you come in halfway through a meeting, let's say you take over from someone, you don't know who the president is. You don't know if it's a man or a woman, okay? You should find out. I mean, it's a good idea to find out pretty quickly who it is. But if you're just thrown in, sometimes you don't know. So really just make your own life easier. Just say president, okay? And then with chair, you can just say chair. No, don't say, well, this is the other thing I was going to say. Just say chair, okay? That's a perfectly legitimate solution as well. Just say chair. So you're not worrying about the gender at all. And it gets the job done. Now, is that the same, by the way, in Chinese? Do you distinguish between presidents and chairs? Or is it the same word?
I think that for most of the time, we will distinguish the gender because it would be obvious if you see this person, right? And we usually just use president or chair. I think they are both alternatives. Because in Chinese, the Chinese version is basically the same.
And how do I say chair?
主席.
Yes,
just as, I don't know if I should say that, but nowadays we call our president Xi, right?
Yeah.
We also would call Mao as Chairman Mao. So they're basically on the same job, right?
Right.
Same title.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay. So did I get Xi?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Pronounce it well.
Now, the other thing I was going to say just here. So another thing you want to avoid is calling the president or whoever it may be, dear. We don't really do that, dear. If it's your granny or one of your friends, you can call them dear. Or Kim Il-sung. Perhaps if it was Kim Il-sung was still around, you might call him dear chairman or Tito. You might call them dear chairman, but yeah, you want to avoid dear. If you want to put in an adjective before when addressing the president, or you may be distinguished, but avoid dear as a maybe the one dear friends. Maybe if they're they're talking at something more informal and they say dear friends, okay, you can do that, but avoid dear president or dear chairman. Okay. Let's move on then. So China is a consistent supporter. So I like this, a consistent supporter. So what about Ivy? What other sort of synonyms do you think you could have for that phrase, a consistent supporter?
Well, how about firm supporters?
Okay.
Or like change it into have always been supporting for.
Oh, that's interesting. China has always supported. Okay, that's good. I like that. I say consistent support, especially going from Russian, because the syntax in Russian is a similar word, actually. They use like consistent. I always think it's a bit long, the consistent. Sometimes I say a firm supporter, an ardent supporter is another thing you could say. And for supporter, another good alternative for supporter, Ivy, can you give me one?
I really don't know.
So something to an advocate. Okay, as a firm advocate, for example, or a consistent advocate. It's good to have those two synonyms. Okay. Now this is an interesting. I mean, I will admit, me and Ivy have done a bit of preparation for this episode. So she was telling me, so for this expression that she used, okay, the course of peace in the Central African Republic, this expression, so please tell me, what is the expression in Chinese for what you've rendered as the course of peace? How do you say that?
In Chinese, it's a 和平进程. 和平 means peace, and the 进程 means the course, the process.
Okay, now what interested me about this was, so this is like a peace process, and I understand, Ivy, that it's the same expression you would use when talking about the Middle East. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, same expression. Okay, so I think you want to stick with that. You want to call it then a peace process. Okay. So you'd probably say China is a firm supporter of the peace process, and here we are in the Central African Republic, or the CAR. One other alternative I've heard, sometimes people, when they have a country name, for example, I know from Russian, sometimes the Russians like to give a full name of a country. They'll call Syria, they won't just call it Syria, they'll call it the Syrian Arab Republic. Okay. And what I don't bother, I avoid, in English you can say Syria, okay? There may be a temptation at times to say the Republic. I would avoid that generally, just because as an English native speaker, when I hear the Republic, I think there's one specific country that I think of. Do you know who that would be?
Republic?
Yeah, if I hear the Republic, yeah.
North Korea?
No. France. I think of France. When I hear La République, the Republic, I think of France. I don't know if that's just me, but anyway, I would just perhaps avoid saying the Republic. And in English, there's always more a short form for a country that you can find. So as I say, for Central African Republic, it's the CAR. Don't say Central Africa either, by the way, because Central Africa is a region that, again, can lend itself to confusion. So the CAR.
The CAR.
Okay, so moving on then, we have provided all the help and assistance in our hands. On reflection, Ivy, do you think there's a better way of doing that with that in our hands? Just tell me, please, what the just for the viewers, just say that in Chinese then. Okay,
so in Chinese it says 力所能及. 力所能及 means whatever we can do.
Okay,
like that,
so
yes.
All right, so I think, as an English native speaker, the expression that seems most appropriate to me here is maybe in our power. Okay. We've provided all the help and assistance that we can, or in our power. One of those two, I think. So in our hands, when I hear that, and I know what you're getting at. I mean,
yes.
But to really sound, have natural in English, we would say, in our power. Okay, moving on. Peace, stability are the preconditions for development. This isn't bad. Now, again, this preconditions. Again, lots of this stuff reminds me of Russian. Funnily enough, because they're always the Russians talk about this a lot as well. I think there's a lot of parallels between the position. There's a lot of parallel between the Russian position and the Chinese position, and I see a lot of overlap in some of the expressions that they use. And I say so preconditions. Okay, I say that. I do say that. It's fine, because it sort of comes quick. I don't know. In Russian, the way it's structured, it's literally structured as pre and then conditions for preconditions. Okay. However, it sounds in English precondition, it doesn't quite sound 100% right. Is there a synonym you can think of that sounds better than preconditions? I ask you, Ivy.
Prerequisite? What's that word?
There you go. Yeah, prerequisites.
Yes,
prerequisites. Peace and stability are prerequisites for development. That sounds much more native speaker-esque. Okay. Preconditions feels like a bit of a cheat, to be honest. I always think, whereas prerequisites is really the mot juste. That's the best word. Both are fine, but prerequisites are better. Okay, we sincerely hope that. That's a good collocation with hope. If you're going to use hope, we sincerely hope that. Okay. Another expression I sometimes use instead of hope is to trust. Okay, trust is a bit of a higher register, and I might say, when I say trust, I must admit I don't tend to put in a collocation, but I might say we trust that all the parties in Central African Republic or in the car can start, etc., etc. I sort of, for some reason, I tend to sort of, I prefer trust. I just feel it sounds slightly that level higher than hope is very. It's very commonly used, just as an alternative. Okay. I guess in Chinese you just have the one word for that, do you? Or there's
this is kind of like set up phrases for us.
Yeah.
When we see that, we would have the default of saying this as sincerely hope.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's a good one to have as your default, to sincerely hope. So yeah, but it's also good to have this. We trust that everything. We trust that the parties will reach an agreement. We trust that the delegations will sign this, whatever. So to trust is a good one to have. And I like what you've done here. As I say, all the parties. So all the parties. That's a good. Again, that's a good word. And what's good about parties is, now I don't know what it's like in Chinese, but in Russian, for example, the word they use in Russian is sides. Okay, and I know, and when you hear Russian officials talking in English, like Lavrov, for example, he will sometimes use sides, whereas in English it's actually really better to say parties, like the parties to a dispute, the parties to a conflict. So is that the same in Chinese? Is it the same word, a side and a party, or no?
And it's more sense like, because party, it usually means like the party, the Chinese like Communist Party.
Okay.
Use that party refers to that kind of organization more often. And yes, and when we say all the forces, like in this text, it literally means not only the government, different organizations, maybe NGOs, and
right. So it's not just political parties. It's all just the parties. Yeah, all the stakeholders.
Yes,
that's another good word.
Exactly.
All the stakeholders as well. Okay. Now this was it's okay. This little bit could start from the long-term interests of their nations and their people. And again, I've got to talk about the Russian again, because I know there's a phrase in Russian that it seems to me from the syntax, it sounds very similar that the Russians often use. And when you put it like that into English, it just doesn't ring true. It's just not quite right. What about Ivy? If you had to rethink that, how else could you perhaps put that?
Or maybe work from.
Okay, that sounds better actually. You could say perhaps you could work in the long-term interests of their nations and people. Okay, that sounds. We wouldn't. I mean, is that literally? I'd be interested in Chinese. Is it literally start?
Literally, it says start means or literally word by word. It could be we should embark from.
Right, proceed from, something like that. Okay, so the whole sentence you'd probably want to say, we sincerely hope that all the parties in the car will rather than
yes.
could. If you're going to hope, it's going to be will. We hope that they will work in the long-term interest, proceed from the long-term interest, work on the basis of the long-term. I think, to be honest, I think the first one I gave you sounds best. I think it could work in the long-term interest.
Yes.
Sometimes it's important to step back from the original, the source text, and because sometimes in English we do things more simply. You don't always have to reflect exactly the syntax in the source. So you want to sort of almost remember work in someone's interests as a sort of set of words, work in their interests. Okay.
Okay.
Of their nations and their people. This was something that sort of interested me, this use of nations. Maybe Ivy, you could, we did have a little chat about this before. Maybe you could just to say a couple of words about this expression with the Chinese use and their nations and people.
Yeah, this in Chinese we usually say from 国家从国家和人民. This is a kind of Chinese governmental cliche.
Okay, it's quite bureaucratic sort of cliche, right?
Yes, and every time when we encounter something, if you are a Chinese speaker, you definitely hear that a lot from the news, from everything. Yes, we say that all the time.
Okay, and the nations, what does that? Does it mean anything?
This part here, I actually made a mistake because I accidentally pronounced an extra X. You know?
Okay.
Yeah. That they're plural.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, we having had a bit of a conference, me and Ivy, we actually think the best solution for this might be for the long-term interests of their country and their people, or of their nation, singular, and their people. Because I was saying to Ivy that when you hear nations, it seems a bit strange that the Central African Republic would be made up of nations.
Yes, of course.
The Central Republic is a nation. So perhaps the best way, I think, would be to talk about the long-term interests of their country or nation, singular, and their people.
Yes, of course.
Okay. Moving on then. So to settle down disagreements throughout negotiations and dialogue. Okay, there's a couple of sort of small bits to fine tune here. You'd want to get rid of the down, okay, to settle disagreements. It's also good to settle disagreements. You also want to have a sort of synonym for that. What's another word maybe we could use for settle?
Like diffuse?
Probably not quite the right collocation. So to resolve.
Okay,
we want to resolve, and so you want to have those sort of two, resolve and settle disagreements through negotiations. So without the out.
Okay.
We don't want the out, through negotiations and dialogue. This is, again, in English, we only have really dialogue in the singular. I know in other languages they sometimes have multiple dialogues, but really in English we just talk about we'd say to settle disagreements through negotiations and dialogue. Moving on to this bit. Now, I like what she's. This is a good verb, to mitigate. The intense situations doesn't in English sound quite right. So how could we do that better, do you think, Ivy?
Maybe just get rid of the situations, like to mitigate the tension. How about that?
See, that sounds mitigate tensions as soon as possible. Okay, that's a good alternative. Much quicker as well. Tensions, 2 syllables.
Yes.
Intense situation, 6 syllables, much quicker. Or what's now, if you're going to go with tensions, can we have a couple of synonyms perhaps to mitigate?
To erase.
Erase tensions. Take the R out of erase. And what does that leave you with?
Like ease.
To ease tensions, right? To ease tensions, and the sort of really good is to diffuse tensions. Okay. Diffuse tensions, ease tensions, dissipate tensions. That's I'd say ease and to diffuse are a good set to have. All right. And then intense situations, we want to say tensions. Okay. Okay. And as well as creating beneficial conditions to realize a safety and sustainable development for their country. Now, this is okay. Beneficial conditions is pretty good. Okay. Now, the word that I like to use in that with conditions, the one the collocation that I tend to favor is conducive. Okay, that's a very much a word that's frequently used. Again, in the UN, in politics, in the media, conducive conditions. And to realize the safety, again, this is again drifting into the Russian again. There's many other languages, European languages, they have this idea of realizovat, realize, realizar. And it seems that whereas in English, when we use realize, we tend to use it in a different context, as I'm sure you know. I didn't realize that. Something? Exactly. We don't tend to use it in the way of making it a reality. So let's just take that as a whole, okay? The realize the safety. Generally, when you start, how do I say safety in Chinese?
安全.
Okay, so more often than not, they're going to be talking at the UN or generally, again, politics, media, about security. Okay, safety. We tend to talk about the safety of given devices and things. And again, so we're going to say the security. And what's a better collocation? What's a better verb than realize?
Achieve, maybe?
To achieve, I would say so. To create conducive conditions to achieve security and sustainable development for their country. Now, I can't remember what you said, but the Security Council, is it the same word that is used here or not? Or is it a different word?
Security Council in Chinese means 安全理事会, 安理会. We use the shortened version, just like we say the car. 安全理事会 means the Security Council, and in China we usually say 安理会.
Oh, okay. So it is the same word, huh?
Yes.
Okay. So remember that. So generally, when you're talking about a country, you're talking about country's security. Okay. The safety. The one time when there's a bit of an overlap is you have nuclear safety and nuclear security. So nuclear security tends to refer to the being secure from external threats. Okay. Nuclear safety is more the sort of engineering side of things. Do all the systems function properly? Does that nuclear reactor, it's not going to break down, is it, in the case of an earthquake or something like that? Is it safe? Okay, so in English we do have that sort of we do make that distinction. Okay, so it's if in doubt with English, you're probably better off going for security if in doubt, as opposed to safety. Okay, now this is an important phrase if you're going to work in sort of international politics. Now, Ivy, you're going to hear, you're not used to obviously working. You've not presumably worked in any political meetings. You're still studying. So she said the global community, and I presume that if you look at the words, it probably you could easily assume that was global community. But when we're talking again about politics, the set phrase is
international community.
The international community. Okay, the international community. That's a bit of a nuisance because international, it's a bit of a mouthful. International, five syllables. And I have been known, if I'm really pushed, if I'm really in a hurry, I'll say the world community. But yeah, world's much easier to say, isn't it? Yes. But you really want to be saying the international community unless you're really struggling. You want to say international community. That's a very important little set phrase to be able to use. Okay, that should provide constructive help. Maybe assistance is perhaps that little bit better than help. Help again is quite low register. Assist. It's always, we've got things like ODA, official development assistance. They like talking about assistance. We're going to assist you. Okay. And here we go again with the global community. So again, China would work with the international community. What tense is that, Ivy? So would work.
Yes, because in the Chinese it says the China more like it's willing to, so I just changed it into would.
Okay. I think perhaps it's better to go with the is willing to, actually.
Okay.
Is ready to, stands ready to work with the international community. That's a phrase they really like at the UN, stands ready. Or you could even, I sometimes say, you're going to tell me if this would sound like China looks forward to working with the global community. Okay.
Yes,
one of those two. Yeah. Okay, to further help the car to achieve the goals of peace, not safety, but
security.
Exactly. Peace, security, and development. Thank you, Chair. Okay. Well, I think that's about it, Ivy. I think we've done it.
Oh, good for us.
That was all right. That went pretty well, didn't it?
Yes, of course.
Well, I hope Ivy has learned a couple of new tricks that will perhaps help her in her future studies there. I hope you viewers, anyone who's watching, hope you've maybe learned a couple of new tricks that might come in handy that you can apply in work. What do you think, Ivy? Do you think you'd be up for doing this again?
Of course, anytime.
We could do this again, couldn't we?
Yes.
I think that went quite well. Went quite well. If you've enjoyed the show, viewers out there, wherever you may be, out in Beijing or in Guangzhou or wherever it may be, in London, wherever watching this, learning Chinese, learning Mandarin, or anyone else who's been watching the show, if you've enjoyed the show, please do smash the thumbs up button. How do you say, Ivy? How do you say smash the thumbs up button in Chinese?
点赞. Yes, 点赞.
That one, yes, do that. If you're enjoying the shows, also press subscribe. I need to know this one. How do I say subscribe?
订阅.
Yep, do that as well. I'm gonna have to work on my pronunciation. And share it with your friends. Tell your friends that the interpretation station has now gone Chinese. How do you say the interpretation station in Chinese?
Like 翻译站.
翻译站. Okay. I'll definitely have to learn that. Okay. There you go. Hope you've enjoyed it. And yeah, I think me and Ivy are going to probably do more of these, so stay tuned. And all that remains for me to say, well, I'll let you say goodbye first.
Okay, so goodbye, audiences of the Interpretation Station. We hope that you enjoyed our episode.
Great. I like Ivy. She's good fun, isn't she? We can do more episodes like this. I'm going to conclude by saying that episode 73 of the Interpretation Station stands adjourned.